23 men flood their own submarine on purpose, 200 feet under the Pacific. Depth charges are hammering the hull, and the only way out is to sink deeper. That decision should have killed everyone aboard, but instead, it saved them all. This happened aboard a United States Navy fleet submarine somewhere in the Pacific theater. Japanese destroyers had picked up the submarine's position and were dropping depth charges in patterns. Each depth charge exploded close enough to rattle rivets and shatter light bulbs inside the hull. To escape sonar detection, the captain needed to go deeper than the submarine was rated for. Going deeper meant the hull could implode, but staying shallow meant certain destruction from above. Submarines survive by controlling buoyancy, using ballast tanks that can be filled with water or air. Flooding a tank adds weight, sending the submarine down. Blowing it with compressed air sends it up. But this crew did something different. They deliberately flooded a compartment that was never meant to flood. The negative tank, normally used briefly for fast dives, was kept flooded far longer than designed. Extra weight pulled the boat down fast, dropping it below where the destroyers expected them to be. The crew also shut watertight doors, sealing off sections in case the hull ruptured under pressure. This compartmentalization is the same principle that keeps a wounded ship afloat, instead of sinking entirely. But at extreme depth, every seam and hatch becomes a potential point of catastrophic failure. Water pressure increases roughly 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet a submarine descends underwater. At the depths this crew reached, the hull was absorbing pressure far beyond its designed safety margin. Crewmen reported hearing the hull groan, a sound veterans described as the boat talking to them. Every man aboard understood that a single seam failure could end the mission in seconds. The captain ordered silent running, shutting down all non-essential machinery to avoid giving away their position. No footsteps, no loud voices, not even a dropped wrench could be risked during this hour. Above them, sonar operators on the destroyers strained to relocate a target that seemed to vanish. The deliberate flooding had done exactly what the crew hoped. It made them harder to find. But silence alone would not stop the destroyers, whose sonar could still ping the black water below. Thermoclines, layers where seawater temperature changes sharply, can bend sound waves and hide a submarine. American submarine captains learned to hunt for these thermal layers and hide beneath them whenever possible. That day, the crew's extreme dive had pushed them below the thermocline the destroyers were searching above. Inside the hull, the temperature told its own story, since deep water runs colder than the surface. Condensation dripped from pipes and gauges, a small but telling sign of how deep they had gone. Above, destroyer captains circled, dropping charges in wide search patterns hoping for a lucky hit. Each explosion sent a shock wave through the water, compressing the hull in ways the crew could feel. Veterans of the submarine service described the sensation as being inside a metal drum struck by a hammer. Light bulbs shattered from the concussive force, plunging sections of the boat into total darkness. Damage control teams moved by feel and memory, trained to navigate their boat blind if needed. Every valve, gauge, and switch had a place memorized long before the crew ever saw combat. That muscle memory now meant the difference between controlled flooding and a chaotic, fatal mistake. Meanwhile, the diving officer watched depth gauges climb past markings the boat was never tested at. Fleet submarines of this class were rated for roughly 400 feet before the risk of collapse rose sharply. Some accounts suggest this crew pushed dozens of feet beyond that rated limit to escape detection. At that depth, a single crack in a weld could flood a compartment in seconds. not minutes. The engineering officer stood by the deep manifold, ready to blow ballast the instant a leak appeared. Blowing ballast too early would surface the boat directly under the destroyers waiting above. Timing had to be exact, calculated from the rhythm of depth charge patterns already dropped. The executive officer counted seconds between explosions, mapping the destroyer's search grid in his head. He was reconstructing the enemy's pattern from sound alone, without a single visual reference underwater. This kind of blind spatial reasoning was a skill honed through months of drills and real combat. For now, the submarine held its silent, deliberate descent, betting depth itself as its only shield. Then a new sound cut through the hull, sharper and closer than any explosion before it. It was the scrape of a depth charge cable dragging against the submarine's outer casing. A charge that close, if it detonated, could crack the pressure hull instantly. Every man aboard froze, listening to metal grind just inches from their lives. Then the cable slid free, and the charge sank harmlessly past without exploding. It was luck, but luck built on the crew's earlier choice to dive deep and silent. Above, the destroyers regrouped, adjusting their search pattern based on the last known contact. Sonar operators used a technique called active pinging, sending sound pulses and timing the echo. A returning echo could reveal range and bearing, but thermal layers scattered and weakened the signal. This scientific quirk of the ocean had quietly become a matter of life and death. Inside the boat, the crew's training reduced fear to a series of practiced mechanical steps. The chief of the boat moved compartment to compartment, checking seals with a flashlight. A slow drip near a hatch could mean a stressed weld about to give way. He reported each finding calmly to control, where officers weighed risk against risk in real time. Above the safe limit, even small temperature changes could cause metal to contract and seals to fail. Engineers back home had modeled these limits, but real combat depth always carried unknown variables. No test tank could fully replicate the shock waves of a live depth charge attack. So this crew was operating past the edge of what any engineer had guaranteed as survivable. The only instruments guiding them now were experience, discipline, and the depth gauge needle. Above, the destroyers began another run, engines churning the water into a low mechanical roar. Inside, crewmen braced against pipes and bulkheads, anticipating the next concussive wave. The explosions came in a rolling series, each one testing the hull's tolerance a little more. Then, as suddenly as they began, the explosions stopped, replaced by an eerie, ringing silence. No one aboard knew yet whether the destroyers had lost them or were simply reloading. Then a new pattern of pings echoed through the water, faster and more deliberate than before. The destroyers had regained a faint contact, and the hunt was starting over again. The captain ordered a slow turn, using the submarine's remaining momentum to slip sideways unseen. A submarine moving at low speed produces far less propeller noise for enemy hydrophones to catch. Every knot of speed traded stealth for distance, a constant calculation the captain weighed by instinct. Meanwhile, the boat's trim had to be adjusted constantly, or it would tilt and reveal its position. Trim tanks near the bow and stern held small amounts of water to balance the boat precisely. An off-balance boat at extreme depth risked an uncontrolled slide, either toward the surface or the seafloor. The plainsmen, controlling the boat's angle with hydraulic surfaces, worked in near total darkness by feel. Dive planes, mounted on the bow and stern, tilted the submarine up or down like airplane wings. At this depth, even a small plane angle produced a dramatic change in the boat's pitch. One plainsman later recalled counting his own heartbeat just to stay steady under the pressure. Above, the destroyers dropped a fresh spread, this time closer to where the submarine had actually drifted. The blast rolled the boat hard to one side, knocking 2 crewmen off their feet. A junior officer grabbed a valve wheel to keep from falling into an open hatchway. Somewhere aft, a pipe joint began weeping seawater, a thin but ominous trickle under pressure. A damage control team moved in immediately, wrapping the joint and bracing it with wooden shoring. This kind of quick, practiced repair under pressure often meant the difference between a leak and a flood. The chief reported the repair holding, and the control room exhaled, though only for a moment. Above them, the destroyer's engines faded slightly, suggesting the search area was widening outward. The executive officer noted the change, cautiously updating his mental map of the enemy's position. Still, the captain refused to rise even slightly, knowing one mistake could reverse every gain made. Minutes stretched on, each one measured by the slow, deliberate breathing of 23 disciplined men. Then, for the first time in over an hour, the sonar operator reported no contact at all. The captain waited 10 more minutes before ordering a slow, controlled descent back toward safer depth. When they finally surfaced hours later, the destroyers were gone, and all 23 men were alive. Their survival came down to physics, discipline, and a decision to trust engineering built for exactly this moment. That's how one crew turned near-certain destruction into survival by mastering pressure, silence, and depth itself.